listening to Leadership at the Edge, and I'm your host, John Williams. I welcome you to our monthly Leadership at the Edge podcast, sharing ideas across the community of leadership practice in every context, everywhere. We invite you to join the conversation via LinkedIn using the hashtag Leadership at the Edge. And don't forget to subscribe to us via Spotify for future episodes. In this episode, we're looking at all things leadership with executive coach, transformation specialist, and author of The Leadership Shift, Stuart Andrews. Stuart is renowned for helping leaders and high-performing teams unlock their potential to orchestrate strategic outcomes, working with clients across diverse industries and with more than 20 years of experience. He enjoys providing new perspectives on the leadership challenges that we all face and building unique experiences that help leaders grow at both the individual and the organisational level. Stuart, welcome.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you with us, and particularly as you're based in Australia and you've come halfway around the world, not just to be on the podcast, of course, but certainly to be as part of your work, actually, with clients and with organisations. Before we get into that, I'd quite like to delve a little bit into your own leadership journey, if we can do that, please, and begin by exploring your background and the factors that have fueled your success. So could you share a few insights on the experiences that have influenced where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. It started off, when I first graduated, I was a computer scientist and started as a developer, and then it didn't take me long to realise that I enjoyed working with people a lot more than computers. And so, that journey took me through a series of roles, moving into business analysis, project management, program management, and then large transformations in global organisations. Mm-hmm. And I guess the interaction with senior and executive leadership teams, that started to spur the motivation for driving high performance and looking at what's working well and what's not working well. Mm-hmm.
And did you, at an early stage, did you in a sense develop the idea of challenging those senior leadership people? Because you think from a business analysis perspective, one of the reasons that they want you to be a business analyst is to challenge the way things are done. Did you learn and decide to do that very quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think later on we'll talk a little bit about curiosity, but absolutely, as part of business analysis, you've got to be curious. Yep. You've got to ask the questions. Why is it that we're doing certain things this particular way? Is there a better way? Is there a more efficient way? Is there a better way of interacting with others? Mm-hmm. And from a project management perspective, you mentioned project management. There's a principle, I guess, in project management that there's a methodology about managing a project, yes, or a number of methodologies, from waterfall to yes, agile and yes, all of those other good things. Do you have a preference for your approach to project management, or is that as fluid as agility, for example? I think that's a great question. I think a lot of organisations today are still grappling with that, but I think it's about fit for purpose. That's probably the most important factor. So as I look at coaching leaders, I think it's about hybrid, looking at what works well in waterfall and looking at what works well in agile, and bringing the two together to deliver a hybrid environment, especially when you're looking at large-scale transformations. I think it's very hard to go, well, hey, we're going to do this in agile, yep, or we're just going to stick to waterfall, and then you sit there for 2 to 3 years before you start to see those benefits.
That's a very interesting point, because I remember somebody asking me once about agile methodologies and saying, how will we know when we're agile? And I remember saying to them, well, what do you mean? Do you have an understanding of what being agile means? And they really didn't. Do you think that we've been, do you think we've been ineffective at explaining to people that any methodology is just a route, a means to an end? It's not the end in itself. Do you think we need to do more to help people understand the outcome that's actually required?
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes we just get caught in the hype of the moment, the latest technology, the latest framework, the latest methodology, and we don't sit there and actually debate the pros and cons and then look at how does it fit into our way of working, and what are the lessons learned from maybe others that have gone before us.
Yeah, indeed. You mentioned fit for purpose just before, which is a great phrase, and it's the way I like to think of almost how I assess almost everything, I think, really. You've been described as passionate about helping leaders unlock their potential, and I'm a big fan of passion. There's not enough of it in business, I think. with your 20 years plus of experience, what's become your biggest learning lesson within business, particularly thinking about what makes a leader fit for purpose, as it were?
I think it's all about people. So you can have processes, you can have technology, but it's your people that enable the shift that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so I think my biggest learning is starting to realise that if you have disengagement, if you have poor employee experiences, then it's going to be very difficult to implement those changes that you're after.
Mm-hmm. And does that mean that, and this is quite sometimes quite a contentious issue, I think, really, does that mean that it's the leadership figure that takes responsibility for the quality of the employee experiences, or do they all need to take responsibility for it?
I think it's a combination, but I definitely do feel that leaders do need to role model and set the example with what is it that we're looking for with our employee experiences. And it's quite easy to remove what I call work friction. Any leader in the organisation, any manager in the organisation can start to have those conversations with their employees by simply asking them, what are the friction points that you're facing?
So essentially, what are the barriers that stop you being
effective,
the best as you can?
Yeah, exactly.
That you can, yeah. Very interesting. And that's a communications issue, of course. And as we both know, effective communication is absolutely fundamental to success as a leader. What do you think organisations need to do to ensure the vision and the strategy, which are, of course, big at leadership level, to make sure they're connected to the everyday challenges people face and get communicated effectively?
So that's another great question, John. I think it's not just about putting up a vision or a strategy paper and looking at it once a year or even reviewing it every quarter. Mm-hmm. It's about how do you tie that and embed that in the, day in the life of the organisation. So that means right down to what are your employees working on and translating that 3 to 5 year goal into a set of actions or things that you can measure on a daily and weekly basis. And there are amazing tools out there like objectives and key results, and there's plenty of options to choose from. But it's how do you bring that together and make that real for employees to understand that everything that they're doing is tying back to their purpose and there's a goal at the end of it.
Very interesting, because you mentioned the word translate there, which actually is a very, I would say, very appropriate word, because the idea, one of the challenges maybe is the language that leadership uses is actually often not the same as the language that the operational teams will use. Because we talk in a sort of strategy and vision and all of this sort of stuff. Actually, that doesn't make an awful lot of difference when you're making something or dealing direct with a customer. Do you think that the ability to translate, almost in a language sense really, is a leadership competency?
Absolutely. It comes down to communication, which you touched on earlier. It's being able to communicate effectively, but also listen. Active listening goes back the other way as well. So it's listening to your people and understanding how their challenges and what they're seeing who are closest to the customers come back up and influence the way you look at your strategy and what adjustments you need to make.
And how, because you have a great deal of experience in working with leaders, how do you think we can help leadership figures to actually achieve that?
Look, I think there are a lot of experts that can help, and I think that there's sometimes an element of coaching that can come in very powerful here, because there's some of these insights that we're able to share with leaders that maybe they're not able to see because they're constantly inside the day in the life within the organisation. So there could be some blind spots, and that's where an effective coach can help them understand where they are. Interesting, yeah. And just picking up on the measurement point, and you mentioned OKRs before, and I'm sure lots of people will still be, I nearly said still be using KPIs as if KPIs were old-fashioned. Of course, if they work, then they're effective in a sense. Do you think or how do you think that leadership figures can ensure that the measures that they use or that they deploy in the organisation are actually the ones which the operational teams can relate to in that day-to-day work? Because it's very easy to just impose measures on teams. I think if you set the objective and the key results that you're looking for at a high level, and then you have your individual teams look at those KPIs that will help them monitor what's actually working, what's not working, but also make sure you've connected them very clearly to those objectives and key results. So I see the two working hand in hand. I don't necessarily think that it's just a replacement.
No, very good actually, because I think in historically the fashions in leadership tend to be, we had this and then we're going to replace it with that.
Yeah.
And then we're going to, but actually, of course, there are some fundamental things around leadership which are unaffected by the fashions and which leaders still need to understand. Like, it is necessary to measure some stuff, for example. With that in mind, can we pick up on the curiosity idea? Because this is I'm also a big fan of curiosity, because I think that's a leadership competency. Just particularly around, tell me first what your understanding of how curiosity can be an effective leadership competency.
I think it starts with asking the question. As you move around the world and you engage with different people from different cultures and how they operate, it's about asking different questions, learning how people think about certain situations, and looking at how you can, actively listen to what it is that they've got to say before you go and impose or provide another alternative view on how you can do something.
And do you see that actually emerging in leadership often enough?
I think with younger generations, Gen Z, they're becoming more and more curious. So I do see that as a natural component that will come out. They're willing to learn, and actually maybe the speed or the rate at which they're learning is quite fast. So naturally, curiosity is embedded in that process.
That's really interesting, because yes, we do see that curiosity, particularly in Gen Z. How do we almost reverse mentor people like me, baby boomers, who might have been almost trained not to be curious and not to question things? How do you think we can do that?
Well, I think, as you said, reverse mentorship can be a great example in doing so. And I think it's just about partnering up with someone who's maybe a bit younger and shows that curiosity and demonstrates that curiosity, and learning from them how they think, their ways of working, what types of questions. But I think it's equally important to make sure that there's a sense of humility in that process.
Oh, right. Yeah. I have to admit that's not something I'm very good at. The trouble with humility is, as soon as you think you've got it, you've lost it.
We all need it.
Yeah, that's right. The other, I suppose, the other thing is this: the harder edge of curiosity is what you mentioned before, which is actually questioning. Because it's great to be curious, but actually that means we need to ask questions. How do you think we can, in a way, develop resilience in, I would call it historical leadership, to meet that questioning and challenging that we are going to see increasingly from, whether it's Gen Z or indeed anybody else, Generation Alpha coming afterwards? How can we help make existing leadership more resilient to that hard edge questioning that they're going to meet?
I think it's important to highlight that it's okay to test and learn, right? That's I think it's part of the curiosity component.
Yep.
It's about how do we, fail fast and learn fast. And so that's part of that process, and it's okay to make mistakes. And I think so for traditional maybe leaders and it's seen or frowned upon, making mistakes.
Yes, and actually to the point where it's not allowed.
Yes.
And of course that completely precludes any vulnerability allowance in a leadership figure. Actually, do you see in your work with leaders who are in many different sectors, geographies, types of business, do you see, can I almost say, a younger leadership already emerging, actively emerging, and maybe being deliberately developed by former leaderships?
Yeah, absolutely. You're starting to see some of those younger Gen Zs making their ways through into leadership roles.
Yep.
It's not to say that they've got it down packed and a lot better. You know, it's just that there's a different way of leading, and they are embracing technology, for example, in leading. I think I was reading an article today, and you should see the SMSs that were going through between the leader and their employees, and it's a different way of engaging than you know, traditional leadership, right? But you know, we still need to look at how to support them as well to make sure that, you know, certain habits that are destructive to the employee experience don't start to emerge there as well.
Yeah, actually, yes, because I guess the learning that you know, older leaders or former leadership figures are going through has in it something which will be of value to future leaders. So yeah, we shouldn't allow ourselves to lose that as well.
Yeah, we shouldn't discount it.
Yeah. Working with the enormous variety of organisations that you have so far worked with during your career, is there any, or are there some, is there any trending business challenge that you see which is common to virtually all organisations?
Yeah, absolutely. I see there's a constant distraction. There's a constant element of noise in any organisation. And I think all organisations need to get better at this, which is how do you, what I would like to call pause and reflect. The more they're able to pause and reflect and have that sort of, you know, we do this in program management, right, which is a post-implementation review, for example. But if we can take that concept and embed it in every organisation, it doesn't matter what team you're part of or what cross-functional team you're part of. If you can pause and reflect, you're able to then to make the improvements and look at our ways of working. Hey, this didn't work before. How do we adjust it? Yeah, how do we make that enhancement?
And do you think, because I'm thinking about that pause and reflect, of course we can do retrospectives and things after the fact. It doesn't necessarily need to wait until after the end of the project or the end of whatever. We can do it at any moment we like. How do we inculcate that habit of pause and reflect in the minds of leaders so that they allow themselves, in the rush to get to the end of the project, to actually pause and reflect? How can we get them to think that way, do you think?
I think it's the coaching and the support, right, through professional development, right? They need to be, you know, willing to look at options to how do we enhance and embrace this,
And that sounds to me, and this is unsurprising, I think in both our experience, that this idea that leadership is not an isolationist function. It's not something that one does on one's own. It actually does need that support structure, the coaches and stuff like this. In your experience with your clients and things, do they already have in place? Have they already thought of this in most cases?
No.
Right.
Yeah, so in most cases, no. Some of the more, what I would call mature organisations, yes, they've got elements of this, but sometimes not practiced, sometimes not practiced as well as it could be. So it's just, you know, it's about that. As I said to you, it's sometimes you get into the point of, you know, having these blind spots, and that's the idea of professional development, right? It's about getting some support to look at those blind spots, get someone external that maybe doesn't even have within your own domain or industry experience to look at it with fresh set of eyes.
And are you finding traction with your clients on balance
absolutely.
towards that idea?
Some clients will walk away after, say, a workshop or some minor tweaks here and there and implement it straight away with the new tools or advice that's provided.
Excellent. Thinking about advice and provision, your book, The Leadership Shift, is described as a practical guide for leaders and execs and responsible for orchestrating change and transformation. What do you think are the key leadership habits that we need to embody to be successful in implementing change?
So I've looked at it from 5 key perspectives in developing this, and that is you need to be courageous. You need to be curious, as we discussed. You need to be, you need to have creativity. You need to be what I would like to call confident humility. So you can have confidence, but you need to humble yourself. You need to be able to accept feedback. You need to be able to ask and seek it as well, so proactively look at it. And then the last one is collaboration, which looks at everything to do with communication as well. So it's how do you collaborate together, both at your leadership team, but also in an organisation. So look, ways of working.
Right. And that's a very nice paradigm, actually, with which to approach not just leadership, but the need to implement change, which I guess is what leadership is often about. Can I pick up on a couple of those if we can? The very first one, the need to be courageous. That's for a lot of, I suppose, again, thinking about boomers and Gen X and things, that's quite a challenging and threatening suggestion, the need to be courageous. Because when you think that, I'm already a leader, why do I need to be courageous? I'm supposed to be telling people what to do and all that stuff. How much success do you think you are having and we are having in getting leaders to understand actually they do need to be courageous?
Yeah, I think it's about taking them through the journey and understanding what are the risks if you don't be courageous. Because a lot of the time it's about, hey, we've got all these regulatory risks, or we've got all these compliance risks. And then the question becomes, well, what about the risk of a startup coming up tomorrow and taking over the business within 6 months? And with AI, it's even faster. So it's the flip side. It's providing the flip side of that to then get them to question, why is it we're doing certain things and for what purpose? What's the intention behind it? Right. What can we do differently? And
that's a really good example that I did of, for example, regulated industries, because actually banking is one in which I've worked, of course, and the idea of disruptors already familiar to banks. So, very good example there. Creativity, that's quite an interesting one as well. And we often like to think of creative people, like Archimedes would be creative, suddenly having ideas in the bath and stuff like this. Actually, we don't often think about leadership as being a creative function. Or is that a completely incorrect assumption?
No, absolutely. It's correct. So it's not only themselves having an element of creativity, but fostering creativity in the organisation.
Right.
Which is the innovation labs that we're starting, we have been seeing for quite some time, right? It's embracing that. It's allowing your people to take calculated risks, to go out and test and learn from it.
I quite like that idea, because that, if we think about leadership as being not just about, I want to become a leader, actually the purpose of it is to help other people become leaders. It's fostering creativity in other people. I like confident humility. I think that's a great phrase, actually, because it hits the nail right on the head. How much traction are you getting with that as a principle amongst leaders?
Well, I think it's the second part, which is the struggle. It's the first one's fine. The confidence is always there. I haven't had that issue before, but it's the humility part. It's getting leaders to, I guess, to be more vulnerable and more humble as a result of it as well. Which is, and you touched on it earlier, which is about that reverse mentorship or reverse, and that's a good example of that, right? It's being open to, hey, what can the younger generation teach me?
And do you use groups like peer group engagement in order to get some of these principles across?
Yeah, it's a combination. So what I find works best is where you have a group setting, but you also have the individual one-on-one setting. That's when it's most powerful.
Right.
So you're getting the teams together, leadership teams together, to be able to, collaborate.
Yes, indeed.
And then talk about, hey, these sticking big rocks that might have been causing issues in organisations over the past. And then working individually at a one-to-one level to help, build those habits of change.
And is there a sector or a culture or a type of business in which you think the willingness to change the leadership style is more easily affected and more easily made positive than others?
Yes, it's those that are scaling up. I find they're a lot easier. They're more open to that change. Yeah, so those that are looking at scaling and growing fast, they get to that point, and we discussed this before, which is the inflection point, right? They realise that hey, we need to work on our leadership team to be able to achieve our goals.
Yeah, and there will be. I call them characteristics that exemplify a scale-up, an attitude and things like this. How do you think we imbue non-scale-ups with those same characteristics in order to be able to grow, whether we're talking about lifestyle companies or large corporates, really? How can we get those same hungry, curiosity, creative characteristics?
Yeah, it's a difficult one.
That's the hard ones till the end.
Yeah, well, I think it needs to start with a desire. That there has to be a desire that, hey, we need to change, or we need to do something different. But if that desire is not there, then I frankly speaking, it's very difficult.
And I think probably the fundamental characteristic of scale-ups is that desire for growth. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Stuart, this is great. We could talk for some time about this. So we're coming to the end of the conversation, and this is the inevitable top tip question here. So, as someone with your experience, enormous experience in business transformation, what advice would you give to someone who is navigating the challenges of change, whether within their current organisation or transitioning or even branching out?
I think it's having a growth mindset. I mean, I'm starting to see this in education, schools starting to teach the growth mindset concept, right, and moving away from having a fixed, which means, it's no longer I can't, it's I can, but, what are the things that you need support with? And I think the more and more people embrace a growth mindset, the more they'll be able to look for those opportunities to improve or get over the obstacles.
Absolutely great. Well, clearly a growth mindset based around the principle of I can, and actually if they read the leadership shift, it'll be I can, and this is how I'm going to. Yep. Okay, Stuart, that's it, I think now. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today on Leadership at the Edge, and thank you everyone for listening. Catch up on all our podcasts, check out all our latest events, and delve into lots of other content and good things on our website at leadership.global. See you next time.